Hello, Daryl here with a quick message before today's show. I want to let you know today's show is sponsored by Fucci, F-U-T-C-H-I, makers of the Engineered Soccer Rebounders. Taylor and I have been busy filming some Fucci videos, which we'll be publishing today, Thursday, December 15th. The first one is how to assemble your Fucci rebounder, which Taylor makes look easy. The second video is how not to play Fucci, which I make look easy, unfortunately. For me. Both of those videos can be found at youtube.com/Total Soccer Show. If you would like to buy a Fucci rebounder, you can do so at www.playfucci.com, spelled F-U-T-C-H-I. You can use the TSS special discount code Total Soccer ! That's Total Soccer ! for $20 off. All right, the show is coming up. On today's show, we are going to talk about the US opponent in January. It's been announced. Keep listening to find out. We're going to talk some MLS news. We are going to talk to Stu Holden, former US men's national team player and current Fox Sports colour commentator and analyst. All that to come on today's show, which starts right now. And welcome to the Thursday Total Soccer Show. I am Daryl Grove, and I'm joined by a man who will not be taking a winter break, even though it's real cold here. Yeah. It's Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Polar vortex and whatnot. Hey, buddy. How you doing?
On the way? I'm pretty good. I biked here, so I'm still getting the circulation back in my fingers.
Extra vortexy.
Indeed. Taking a winter break is a thing we've been thinking about because, he said, pert happily-ish, we were looking at teams that the US could play at the end of the January camp. News came out yesterday, Serbia.
Right.
The US national team, Bruce Arena's second debut as US national team manager, will be against Serbia in San Diego, January 29th.
This is
surprised?
Correct. Yeah, I was, because I did not know that the Serbian Superliga... First of all, I didn't know it was called the Serbian Super League.
Yeah.
Secondly, I didn't know that they had a winter break, and we found that out because we decided to figure out if they did.
Yep.
We searched their schedule. Their last game, I think, is today, the final league game of 2016, and then if you go to the next match day, it is late February.
Okay.
So I'm pretty sure that means there's a winter break.
Yeah, so that means it's going to be domestic based Serbian players coming to San Diego to play the US. And I realize
so many big names in there. So many big names.
all the guys you've really heard of play in Europe.
Yeah.
Right?
But not in Serbia. Since Serbia is, I'm pretty sure, in Europe.
So play in Western Europe in the big leagues that don't have winter breaks that are long enough to let them free, right? So we don't know the strength of this roster, except when we went to the Serbian Federation website, they said this is similar to the game we played against Qatar in September, which I checked into that. It was domestic-based players. They lost 3-0 to Qatar in Doha.
Yes. But to be fair, that does kind of smack of them sending a team to Qatar, maybe because Qatar gave them money to do so.
Okay.
It might not have been the best team they could have fielded, obviously, since there was a lot of domestic players.
What's different? Isn't that what we're doing? I'm not sure if teams
except that
get paid
it might not even have been, because I don't even know, was that on a break when they said that, or was that just sort of like, hey, we want to play a friendly, we need to get some experience, you send a team?
If it was September, it was probably part of the FIFA calendar, and it would have been the warm-up for a qualifier, I would guess.
So I'm still...
very much a warm-up in Doha. It was 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
Truth. I would say the way that I'm choosing to look at this, rather than a team that lost 3-0 to Qatar, is the team that won the 2015 U20 World Cup.
Yes.
And a lot of those guys are either playing still in Serbia or playing in leagues that might be on a break. For example, Russia. You could have Russia still on a break, which means some of those Russian Premier League players could be coming back to Serbia to play for Serbia.
I had a quick look. Jovanovic, the centre-back, who did play at the U20 World Cup 2015. They won it, right? Beat the US on penalties in the quarterfinals, I want to say. He's with Zenit. So he's on break. He might be available. Also, Zivkovic is one of the big stars of that U20 World Cup. He's actually with Benfica, but he's only played once for them. So there's a chance he gets released, maybe.
And then you've got other guys, like I forget who it is who's currently leading the Serbian Superliga scoring charts.
Top of my head, definitely not looking at soccerway.com. It's Darko Biedov, who's actually in a three-way tie, but he's top scorer with 10 right now.
All right, and he's like a 27-year-old Serbian with no caps previously.
Yes,
so you might also see some people brought brought in who have never previously played for the national team, this is the opportunity for them to do so.
And I'm still happy about this, right? Because we've kind of been joking for a year now that we don't want to play Canada again.
And Iceland's B team.
B team.
So, or C team,
I think even though it's not the all-star Serbian team with all their scary wingers and all that, it's still a team of even uncapped players who will have a point to prove, who are not... I mean, I know it's kind of nice to go from cold Serbia in the winter to San Diego, right? Where it's always 50 lowest.
I think that's... I'm not joking. I think that's a big thing. That it might not be such a fun thing to go to Qatar, but I do think in January, if you're in Serbia, to get a call up from the Federation that's like, hey, we're going to go play a friendly in California. It's like, yeah, I want to do that. I'm in.
Put me
Let's
on that
go.
plane. Yeah. But when you get there, those guys will have a point to prove, right?
That calf injury that I had when we were playing Qatar seems to have healed magically. I'm good to go.
Pacific Ocean healed it.
But yes, so they will all have a point to prove. So it will be an exciting game.
So it'll be a good fiery game. It won't be sort of... Because I do have a memory of these January things as just being like a little bit going through the motions, right?
Yep. I mean, that was the joke we made is like, I'm excited to beat Canada 1-0 and draw Iceland 0-0. Now, that said, there is...
That's optimistic.
According to reports, going to be one more friendly that will be in this break, in this January camp. The opponent has not yet been scheduled, so it could be Canada, it could be Iceland. I think we looked, it could also be Russia is on a break. That would be a bit controversial.
This is that winter break research that you've done.
Norway, Sweden, Japan, Korea, and then, as I said, Canada and Iceland. So any of those could potentially bring in their domestic players and have another friendly.
Do you get the feeling Canada are like, hey, we're available, and US soccer, Sunderland is like, all right, we'll hold there a sec. Please hold. And
I don't know.
Basically, they're trying to play someone else, someone a bit more challenging, someone who we haven't played so many times.
You've got them on the hook. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, and then they're the fullback. They're the safety school.
An entire country. I'm sure they're going to appreciate that. Hello, Canadian listeners. I apologize for my co-host, who I can't help but notice is British and has already discredited Eastern Europe and is now discrediting Canada.
Oh, I think Serbia would not enjoy you calling them Eastern Europe, Central Europe.
Don't try to dig yourself out now. You've made your bed.
Have I lost us Canadian and Serbian listeners?
I think so. Almost certainly. But you can make it up when the United States plays Serbia with your match report.
Okay.
Your match preview and report.
Yes. All right. So we still don't have Bruce Arena's roster for the January camp, obviously. No. Do you call it a roster? It's more like a list of names in camp, basically, right?
The list of 75 names.
It's going to be. We're expecting it to be kind of big, right?
Yes, we are. Speaking of those names, we might be talking about one in just a second. But first, we should discuss a sponsor.
Yeah. So our MLS coverage, which is about to begin, is sponsored by Ruffneck Scarves, the official providers of scarves to US Soccer, MLS, USL, and NCAA. So our MLS coverage is sponsored by Ruffneck Scarves, and thank you to them.
Indeed.
What's our lead MLS story, Taylor? I feel like there's no gigantic, mind-blowing story, but there's lots of little interesting things happening.
Yeah, I think since I said we were going to be talking about that camp and potential players therein, I think one of those names who might be included is Jermaine Jones, who is a domestic player, will be continuing to play Major League Soccer. At least that's how it seems. The LA Galaxy have acquired his rights, have not yet signed him to a contract. It seems like he is probably going to hold out for a lot of money, and they will agree on a fairly large amount of money in the end.
So the history is signs with New England after the World Cup, big money.
Yep.
It's like $4 million for a year and a half, right?
4.7, something like that. It was a lot, yeah.
Much less money for Colorado, 2016.
Yep.
Got them somewhat was involved in getting them to the conference.
Yeah, well, more on that later. Yeah.
So you think maybe a little bump over in LA, right? Where there's no more Steven Gerrard taking all that DP money.
Yeah, no more Steven Gerrard, no more Robbie Keane, Landon Donovan. I think re-retiring.
Yes.
Is that where we are at this point? Yeah. So there's definitely room on that roster. And Grant Wall tweeted out yesterday that LA Galaxy executives are saying that this is not them sort of being cheap. This is not them being cost effective. They will continue to be the LA Galaxy that we all know. We will see if that is actually the case.
My gut reaction when I first saw this news was
cost-cutting, I think, is the phrase that he
used. Not
used.
cost-cutting, yeah. So my gut reaction was, good signing.
Yeah.
Right? Kind of short-term. It depends if... I've only just realised that could have been a DP slot that went to another big name.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, there is so much more TAM coming in as well that it might also... He might not technically be a DP, but they could pay him down to be a DP. I forget how all that works.
I bet that conversation is happening in Los Angeles right now.
And it'll happen again as we get closer to the start of the next MLS season, and we can discuss all those good contract facts and figures.
All right, my question for you then, money aside and profile aside, who's the most useful player to have in your roster based on past MLS performance, Steven Gerrard or Jermaine Jones? Because I'm leaning Jermaine. I'm Team Jermaine on this one.
Yeah, I think I am too, although it's definitely not as clear-cut as you would think. Because, for example, you say, and then you backtracked very quickly, that he was heavily involved in that Colorado team that made the Western Conference Finals, right?
Well, I just remembered he didn't play that many games.
So here's what I'll say to you. Okay, if we were to compare Steven Gerrard and Jermaine Jones in terms of number of matches played in Major League Soccer, how many? Who do you think has played more? First of all,
Jermaine Jones, because he's been here longer.
Well, you're wrong already.
Oh, no.
Really? Yeah. Well, no, excuse me. You're right. I apologize. By 3 games.
Hey, right is right.
Yeah. Jermaine Jones arrived in August of 2014. He played 28 times for New England. He has played 9 times for Columbus.
Yeah.
Or he did play 9 times
It was
for
an
Columbus.
injury-hit season, 2016.
Yeah, and then July 2015 is when Steven Gerrard arrived. 34 appearances for the LA Galaxy. So it's real close in there. And I mean, I know
as players get older, famously their injuries clear up. So Jermaine Jones will be fine. 2017.
And so, but I think you still take the point. I still take your point that he is a player who is. That's what his game is built around, and so it's never going to be I'm here and I'll play, but it's not that important. Like, it is still him trying to prove himself. He wants to be in the U.S. national team. He wants to play for as long as he can. So I think there is more motivation for him to play the way he plays than, say, Steven Gerrard had at L.A.
Also, there is that thing where Steven Gerrard, the Steven Gerrard of my youth, is box to box all over the place, right? Like, he's an attacking threat. He's coming back, making big tackles. He's everywhere. And he's slowly drifted backwards to be more of a deep-lying player, but was never really as successful in that role as he was as all-action Steven Gerrard shooting from distance.
Yeah.
Jermaine Jones has just kept being all-action Jermaine Jones. Like, it's almost, I was joking earlier about injuries and age, but it's as if he hasn't aged in terms of the ground he covers.
Yeah. I think the only downside to this, because you're right that he's still going to be that Jermaine Jones we know.
We saw him take a chest pass sliding on his knees in the Western Conference Finals.
But I think for Galaxy fans who have seen the kind of roster churn, lost their head coach, sorry, LA fans, we got some emails about that one, because we were excited about Bruce Arena.
Right,
or
I see.
We were speculating that it would be Bruce Arena before it was Bruce Arena for the U.S.
Curtin Offo in charge now. That's been announced.
But I believe it was Juninho, who has played many times for LA Galaxy, went to Liga MX, has come back. LA Galaxy own his rights, but I think they won't get him now because they have Jermaine Jones.
There's a rumour about maybe getting Juninho back. So that could work, right? Because they've also lost Laurentowicz, right?
But I think the point there was that, like, fans were sort of looking at these moves as, like, you could have a guy who's a proven entity and you know exactly what you're going to get out of him and isn't going to have injury concerns, or Jermaine Jones. Right. And it felt a little bit, I think, to some LA fans like you're going for the name that people know so you can sell tickets, even if you don't know how reliable that name is going to be from a physical standpoint.
Fair.
Whereas the guy who's maybe less heralded, less known, but is going to probably get you better results, or more likely to get you better results.
If I've learned anything from watching MLS these last few years, is that you can't really predict anything.
Oh, really? What gave it away? The fact that the last 2 champions have been like the last team into the playoffs?
Right.
Yeah.
The fact that Colorado, when we did our preseason, Colorado Rapids, we were saying, this isn't going to work out. And we weren't the only ones. People were...
you're lumping me in with we here.
Okay, I apologise. But many people were saying, they've made bad moves off-season. They end up conference finals, right? So it's really hard to know what's going to work in MLS.
True. I think one thing that has been proven to work in MLS is having a soccer-specific stadium. And we can talk about that for a second because we've got Orlando news.
Yes, and I'm weirdly excited. I think the thing that got me excited about this is seeing the steep stand that they're building.
Yep.
Right? Just to think, I look forward to seeing that on television. If I'm an Orlando fan, I'm not, but if I was an Orlando fan, I'd look forward to being in that stadium.
Yeah, because, and I know it's not comparable, but one of my favorite stadiums in the world is the Bernabeu. And I'm not a Real Madrid fan by any stretch of the imagination, but just how steep that is and how it's just so, like, all the fans are right on top of you. It creates that atmosphere that you love. I'm a Cleveland Browns fan. That's what the old Cleveland Stadium used to be like. It was all claustrophobic and terrifying, and the locker rooms were tiny.
I didn't know you were a Cleveland Browns fan.
Yeah, I don't talk about it much because there's not much reason to. But, Cleveland and Washington, those are my teams. I've picked real winners in a variety of different ways. But so I like that steep stand. I like that it's going to be that kind of claustrophobic environment for the opposition coming in.
So things I also read and saw in the renderings, 360 lower bowl, so it encloses the field. Really nice. 8 feet sunken. I love a sunken stadium.
Why is that?
I don't know. It just feels cool.
I mean, well, you're correct. That's why you do it, is because you put it in the ground. It is technically cooler.
Technically, yeah. But I also just think of, like, walking from outside, if you can, like, look in and you see the stadium, like, down a bit. I don't know why, it just seems cool to me.
And then didn't you also add, in your research, didn't you find that it was privately financed as well?
Yes. I mean, they claim, privately funded, so there's no Orlando, the city of Orlando money.
So congratulations to all of the corporate sponsors who will soon be naming that stadium.
So right now it's Orlando City Stadium, but it would make sense that becomes a sponsored stadium.
Yeah,
in the future,
I mean,
right?
Makes sense from the conventional commercial standpoint, yes.
So good stuff coming for Orlando City. Here's a segue for you, or a link. Orlando City B, we saw play this year. Looks like DC United, also thinking about their new stadium in Buzzard Point. Not till 2018, probably, right? They are going to announce soon, it seems, DC United 2. They will have an MLS reserve team in USL, which means no more affiliate deal with our local Richmond Kickers. When I saw this news this morning, I weirdly felt semi-celebratory, and I surprised myself.
Why is that?
Because you would think that it would be good to be associated with an MLS team, get those 4 or 5 players on loan, bolster your roster. But I realised that watching the Kickers this year, I think I prefer just knowing, right, these are the guys on the roster, they're here the whole time. That's it. There are not 4 players coming up and down 95, staying for a couple games, then going back. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, I think that is the downside to having an affiliate team that is not within the same city. So, Orlando City B, for example, you can kind of have that roster churn, and it's not that big of a deal because, it's just, I assume, going from one field to another field and
I'm not sure where their home stadium is.
So it's still the same city, though, I guess is my point. It's not a potential hour-and-a-half drive up and down 95 or a potential 5.5-hour drive.
It really depends on the traffic.
That said, and I take your point when it comes to, say, the goalkeeper situation this year. Richmond had Ryan Taylor blow out his ACL very early on in the season. Then you just had a rotating cast based on who was available or not available from DC. But then you have players like Miguel Aguilar who came in, played a big chunk of the season, and really helped Richmond make the playoffs and do well in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So it's going to be kind of a little bit of a give and take, a little bit of an up and down, I think, because you do still have that connection where you can have those kind of bigger players
you'll
come
miss MLS quality players, right? But the flip side is we could get really good USL player who's there from game 1 till the final game.
This is true.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say the best thing about it is that DC fans can rejoice, because I think that's another sign of growth and progress for a team that maybe hasn't had so much to cheer about in years past.
Absolutely. So, for example, Chris Durkin is the 16-year-old. I think he's still 16. He plays for the US Under-17s, homegrown player signed by DC. They sent him down to the Kickers sporadically. He played, maybe 3 or 4 games this past season. Looked really good. 16-year-old playing in a men's league. Looked not out of place at all.
Yeah, we've talked about this
before. Played against
before.
Swansea City in preseason friendly.
Yeah, and we've talked about it before that he is not Andrew Carlton. Andrew Carlton, is the 17-year-old on the field. Yeah. Chris Durkin, you wouldn't know that for sure because he is so big. He does not stand out in a bad way.
But I'm thinking he would benefit, and all the other potential homegrown players for DC will benefit from having a dedicated team that they play for the whole season. DC United 2, which is close by to DC United 1. It just seems like an environment where he's going to get more minutes, and DC can have more than 4 or 5 players getting that experience outside of the DC first team. I think it's good long term for DC.
Yeah.
Right? I think they've looked at what other teams are doing, seen that it's working out, and thinking, we want in on that.
Yeah. And then, what's the phrase you often use when discussing podcasts? Like a high tide raises all ships or whatever?
Yeah.
And that's another point, is that, more professional teams means more opportunities for professional soccer players.
Yes, that's true.
More people getting jobs.
I mean, literally on the Kickers, there'll be probably 3 or 4 new contracts for 2018, right? Which is when this will happen. Because there'll be full-time contracts there.
And Daryl and I are ready. If ever that call needs to come in, we will answer that call.
I feel like we make that joke every time we talk to Lee Cowdershaw.
I think we do, and I think he always politely laughs, but never really, makes it pretty clear that that's not going to happen. That said, and this is an unplanned segue, but a segue that I think has to happen, in discussing players that could play for USL teams because they're out of contract and looking for clubs, Freddyu Adu time. Let's chat Freddyu Adu, shall we?
Okay, so you know more about this than me because you did this morning's Goalmouth, which is our other podcast where we round up the morning's news. Freddyu Adu has left Tampa Bay Raiders, right? By his own choice, or what's the deal?
Contract expired. He had a 1.5 year long deal. He has seen that contract out, and it seems like neither party wanted to renew it. I'm not sure who was the one that said no first.
Yeah.
But regardless, he is a free agent looking for a new club.
All right. Sometimes you both know.
Yeah, and I think this is where our ignorance regarding the NASL comes in, because we didn't watch much of Tampa Bay. I just assumed he was doing well because he had been in the season previously.
Yep.
He had looked good. From what I understand, his performances had been kind of textbook Freddyu Adu, flashy and exciting. It seems like he hasn't played very much this season. Maybe that's because of injury. Maybe that's because of personality problems. I did see a couple different people commenting that they had heard him making negative comments from the stands about the team.
This is Tampa fans on Reddit, is that what you said?
Yeah. So it sounds like maybe it was just kind of had reached the point where it was time to part ways. But again, that's all allegedly. That's all rumor and hearsay. Who knows if it's true?
So, but it sounds like if Freddyu Adu just wasn't interested in playing for Tampa Bay anymore, like he's too good for NASL/USL.
In his mind, sure.
In his mind. But I don't see MLS teams lining up to take him. So if you're too good for like tier 2 but not good enough for tier 1, there is no tier 1.5. Like, where does he go next?
Somewhere else. I mean that's really it. Like, I think
overseas?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I said it jokingly last night to you via text, but like maybe China. Like, maybe you can go there and maybe your name has a little bit of cachet, and so you can get some money. But I mean, the reality is he's been in the United States for a year and a half now. He's been available for the past few years. The last MLS team to have a go with him was Philadelphia, and that didn't necessarily work out. I think he's kind of a known quantity at this point, and I don't think MLS front offices want to roll the dice with him.
So, can I tell you where I am with Freddyu Adu? I mean, obviously we know he's not going to be the player that everybody thought he was.
27, by the way. We haven't mentioned that yet. He's 27 years old.
So, the player that everyone thought he would be when he was a teenager, and we thought, okay, he's the American Pele, all that. I understand that's not going to happen, right? Yeah. So I'm not suggesting that there's going to be some dramatic turnaround. It turns out he was brilliant all along, right? We win the World Cup. But I at least want him to have a settled down professional career with some respect to it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to be like, oh yeah, he ended up having this really enjoyable. I want to see him happy, basically. A happy career where everything fits for him. It just feels like nothing has ever quite fit because he's never stayed anywhere long enough for it to be like, oh, this is the place.
Yeah, and I see your point, but I would take it the other way and say that if he signs for a new club, it will be his 15th in 12 years. And I think when you reach that point, it sort of becomes like maybe it's not always the clubs that are the ones who are like causing the problems.
Yeah,
if you consistently aren't settling and you're consistently on the move, maybe that says that you're consistently burning bridges, and therefore people don't want to take a gamble on you next time.
You know how Paulo Di Canio found West Ham? And it just it was just the right place.
Yeah.
And Eric Cantona found Manchester United. It was just the right. I mean, it's a different level, but it's the right place, and everything worked out. There's got to be somewhere like that for Freddyu Adu, but I'm struggling to find where it could be.
But I think then there are the other ones, like, and this is not a fair comparison talent level wise, but I think it's Christian Vieri, who, like, if you look at his Wikipedia page, it's like every year he had a new club because he would like come in, play well. Burn that bridge, make people angry, move on to the next club. Maybe Cassano is in the similar boat. I think I think he's had a little more like consistency, but I'm pretty sure it was Vieri who moved like every single year. So you do also sometimes just have that
together. I'm imagining a Cassano-Vieri strike
force. I just assume it was just instantly fights.
That seems like
fights and pastries would be my guess.
Perfect partnership.
So I think first of all, yes, it does. Add some Freddyu Adu in there, and you've got a team or a stew going. But I think he does kind of have that problem now, where you don't have an ASL, so your options are MLS, which I think he would like to play in, but probably won't get a chance, or USL, which maybe he'll see as beneath his status.
Maybe MLS expansion team? I'm looking at, so I say that because I've been looking at the Atlanta United roster.
Yeah.
I was going to quiz you on how many people are on it. I already did. I did this off air. 19 players on Atlanta's roster now.
They've got them a team.
That's taken,
sort of.
It's really taken me by surprise.
I bet those 19 players are not the 19, like amongst the final roster that are there. Not all of them, at least. I think you're still going to have some sharing. You're still going to have a lot of movement. Atlanta seem to have proven themselves capable and willing to wheel and deal.
That's true.
In this offseason, I think they'll continue to do just that.
So speaking of, like, I look at their roster now, and they just got Jeff Laurentowicz from LA Galaxy, which I know, he's not in his prime, but that's a solid MLS player who knows how the league works. He's a great guy to go. Michael Parkhurst, they got Zach Lloyd from Dallas. These are just steady MLS vets, right?
Yep.
Definitely worth having.
Yeah, the aforementioned Andrew Carlton in there as a youngster to keep an eye on.
And actually, that was my other question was going to be, when you only saw like 3 players on the roster, it was like Kenwyne Jones, Andrew Carlton, and someone else.
Yeah.
You could be like, oh, that 16-year-old Andrew Carlton, he's going to get some minutes in MLS this year.
Yeah, he might not anymore.
Now there's 19 players. I'm starting to think, I'm wondering, like, how many? What do you think?
I think he'll get some time. I think he'll get some US Open Cup minutes. I think more likely he probably spent some time with Charleston, Atlanta's USL affiliate.
Okay.
I also think that they have 2 DPs at present, Atlanta?
They have one like proper DP, Almiron, and one young DP who's on loan at Tijuana. It's Viaba.
And those rumors of Andres Guardado are not going away. I feel like that one still might happen. Yeah. And I think that's a pretty solid move for Atlanta.
So you think? So it seems like they're doing a very good job of like stocking the team with players and a coach that are set up to, it seems, succeed right away, right?
Yes, I think so.
Succeeding right away doesn't mean giving heavy minutes to a 16-year-old, no matter how good.
True. Yeah? Because, and I think this is another point to go all the way back to our earlier conversation about Major League Soccer and how it's a very unpredictable league. I think if you are I would still say I'm like a relative novice when it comes to the ins and outs of Major League Soccer because it is so complex and because building a team
no one can know it all.
Is so difficult. Right. But I remember like when Charlie Davies signed for DC United.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like, oh, they've got Charlie Davies. That's going to make an impact. I remember when Jermaine Defoe signed for Toronto. And I was like, oh, that's all you need. You got it now.
It was a bloody big deal.
Exactly. And like the reality is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players does not an MLS team make. You got to have a full squad.
Yeah, but that's why the Laurentowicz and Parkhurst and Lloyd signings, that's the good stuff for me.
And that would be the thing that I would say, if you're Atlanta, those aren't like the sexiest names, but those are the names that I think should be reassuring. Those are the Janinos of Atlanta. That's what I'm going to say there. And by contrast, what Minnesota have 8, 9 players on the roster?
Yeah, it's early. That seems more normal, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think that they're also going to be a team that probably utilizes the draft. I think a couple months ago we were fairly confident that Jeremy Ebobisse would end up with Atlanta because he'd been playing for Charleston this past season. I'm guessing he is going to be the number 1 pick and he's going to play for Minnesota. I think they're going to rely on that draft to really build up the talent a little bit there in Minnesota.
Well, we'll keep an eye on that. Right, mid-January, I think the draft happens.
Sounds good to me.
All right, our MLS coverage today was sponsored by Ruffneck Scarves, the official providers of scarves to US Soccer, MLS, and USL, and NCAA.
And the Total Soccer Show.
And the Total Soccer Show. Yeah. We have a TSS
How do you
scarf
forget that one?
in the Ruffneck Scarves shop. You can find it at ruffneckscarves.com. That's with 2 Fs. And you can get 20% off with the discount code Total Soccer Show, all one word. I think uppercase.
All uppercase.
I think it's okay. Try it both ways just in case. For 20% off at ruffneckscarves.com, spelt with 2 Fs. Thank you to Ruffneck Scarves.
I feel like you're actively not spelling it. Ruffneck. I don't know why you went with 2 Fs there.
Either way, the link is in the show notes.
Fair
and you
enough.
get 20% off with Total Soccer Show. Thank you to Ruffneck Scarves for sponsoring today's episode.
Indeed.
Up next, Taylor, we have an interview with special guest, first time on the show, Mr. Stu Holden.
Yes, sir.
So here's our interview with Stu Holden.
Joining us now for the first time ever, courtesy of Alexi Lawless, we have Mr. Stu Holden. Stu, thanks for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, not a problem, guys. I'm honored to be on it, especially if I got recommended by Alexi Lawless. I think my career just hit new heights.
Well, yeah, I'm sure that's the highlight of your career is being recommended to a podcast. I did appreciate that I texted him, and I was kind of very timid and like if you don't mind, could you connect us with Stu? We'd really love to have him on. We really respect the work he's doing. And he texted me back, yeah, I don't know if I can find him, and then sent me a photo of you two posing together. So I appreciate the.
That sounds about right. Yeah, we've been glued at the hip for the last couple of weeks. All the games we've had on the road and stuff. So yeah, it's good stuff, man.
Yeah, we wanted to talk to you about that specifically, about the work you're doing with Fox and about the games you're covering, and then the games that you're in studio as an analyst for. So I think Daryl, you had a question about that, right?
Yeah, so, Stu, I'm sure we've mentioned before that we're big fans of your colour commentary work. It seems like of all the colour commentators, you are the guy that spots things fastest. And I'm going back, the first time we realised this on the show was, I think it was the Mexico-Uruguay game during Copa America, and Mexico changed their formation like 30 seconds in, and Stu Holden spotted it. So we want to know sort of, what do you do to be able to spot those things when other colour commentators can't? Do you employ some different technique?
Well, to be honest, I've just kind of been a student of the game, I'd say, for throughout my career, and tactics and that type of thing has always interested me. And certain coaches that I've had big influences on my career, such as Bob Bradley and Owen Coyle and Dominic Kinnear, and guys that just are in tune with the game. And I always found that was one thing that helped me as a player. I wasn't the quickest. I wasn't, but I always felt like I was one step ahead in certain situations with reading of the game. And that's something I've really kind of taken on as an analyst. And, the biggest thing you get told straight off the bat when you're learning is always answer the question why. And I always feel that a lot of times in games, tactical adjustments or little player adjustments that are moving, perhaps from the right to the left, that's a lot of the time why certain things are happening within games. So if I can point that out, it's certainly always something I'm looking for. Even the US-Mexico game just recently in November, I was looking at, how the U.S. were going to be in a 3-5-2, and then Mexico, just knowing that Juan Carlos Osorio is a very tactically astute manager, that he's always looking for those things. And, Carlos Vela comes over to him right before kickoff. He tells 3 other players to move this way. And it was just something that, I managed to pick up out of the corner of my eye and just seeing just kind of how that changes how the game's going to unfold. So, the fact that you guys notice that means I'm doing my job right. And that means, that makes me feel good as an analyst.
Well, good. That's what we're aiming for here. I will say, Daryl and I do the play-by-play and color commentary respectively here in Richmond, and you definitely put me to shame, because I think a part of it is that I look at what I have this idea of what teams should be doing based on their formations, not necessarily what they should be doing to win the game, but just like, oh, they say they're in a 4-2-3-1, so why is that guy there? Why is this guy here? Do you find yourself sort of looking at the U.S. is playing a 3-5-2? Traditionally, that means that you want like your wingbacks to be doing this, you want one guy here, and then evaluate from that kind of status? Or is it sort of, do you just watch as the game evolves and try to figure out what's happening, what should be happening, and what isn't happening?
I think it's more so that, because it's too hard to nail down what a 4-2-3-1 should look like. You know, a 4-2-3-1 for Barcelona or a 4-3-3 for Barcelona is going to look different than it is for Spain, or it's going to look different than it is for Manchester City. And I don't try and get too caught up on the numbers side of that, of the 2s and the 3s. It's more so starting positions, and then how the team, when over the course of a game, how are they playing it? Because the perfect example is the U.S.-Mexico game, again, is Jurgen Klinsmann playing a 3-5-2 with a group of players that had never played that collectively, had only 1 week to coach and go through that. And you look at perhaps an Antonio Conte and what he's been able to do over the course of a season with Chelsea and playing a 3 in the back with 4 in front, or what he did with Juventus, and just coaches that know how to get the best out of their group and players that know their roles within that system. And it's a bad recipe when you have a group of players that don't know their roles within a system and they're asked to play that system. So I think that's more important, as opposed to how they line up. It's opposed to how they interact and how they react to certain situations throughout a game. And that will tell you if a team has been well coached, or if a team is really playing in tune and in sync and have a good chance at winning the game.
Stu, we want to ask about your preparation as well. Sort of how many hours before a game are you sort of doing your homework? And could you give us a rough idea of sort of what sort of homework you do to get ready?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I'll be straight up honest, is when I first started this and was a player and started doing a little bit of media here and there, I turned up to my first game. I did it with NBC Sports. I worked with John Strong up in, it was Chicago against San Jose, and I had my notebook, my little notebook. I'd taken a couple notes. I'd read a few articles and felt, I know these players. I'm prepared for this. And I think John turned up with what might have been an encyclopedia full of stats and this and that about guys. And the further I got into it, I was realizing, this is something I need to take seriously if I want it to be a second career. And so from that point to now, I would say my preparation is tenfold. I have a good routine of, a database of stickers that I've started putting together. And I think you might have, I tweeted something after Copa America of all my notes and my folders and stats and everything that I'd accumulated over the course of the tournament. And it's a monstrous thing, but the preparation starts a couple days before a game. And the first thing I told my boss at Fox was, I don't want to be on TV because I had a good career or I played at a high level. I want to be on TV because I'm good. And that's been kind of my motto throughout broadcasting, is that I feel like I know the game, but I want to work hard to be good on TV. So that's, all the little things that you can control, and being prepared for hits at the top of the broadcast, or having insight that is specific to things that I've figured out, or talk to players or coaches that I've had links to. And that's kind of all become part of it. So, I'm doing the Club World Cup right now, for example. And, I have we get a lot of good material here to go through, and we have a stat man and a researcher, and all that stuff's great. But the biggest thing that I always find for me is just watching games. And my wife might not be the biggest fan of it at times, but I sit in front of that screen and that computer, and I'll watch back at least a full 90 minutes, if not 2 games of the teams that are going to play, just kind of learn their tendencies, player positions. Then I'll kind of read through the latest articles to know kind of current news stuff. And then once the game starts, I focus more on the game as opposed to the background. I leave the background stuff to the play-by-play, but it's a lot more work than I initially thought. My friends are like, oh, you just turn up and you just call a soccer game. That's a great job. And I'm like, yeah, it is a great job. I get to comment on soccer games, but there's a lot of research and prep that goes into this if you want to be good at it. So I don't think people always grasp that side of it.
I was looking at the Club World Cup schedule. I know it's Club America versus Real Madrid, and I think it said 5:30 a.m. Eastern on my laptop. So
oh boy!
Does that mean?
Please don't remind me.
Does that mean 2:30 Pacific? You'll be calling that game.
I had one this morning, Kashami Antlers, and that one was the same thing. I was up at 1:30 was our call time at the studio, so I went to bed at 7, slept for 4 hours, then did my final little bit of just refresher, and then went into the studio and got home about 5:30 in the morning and slept for another 3 hours, and then was woken up by a 10-month-old. So there you go.
That's what I was going to say. It seems like being on the newborn schedule would make you accustomed to calling games at all hours of the night, because it's like I go to bed at 7, I wake up at 1.
Yeah. It would if it was a little earlier on, although she's been sleeping better recently and sleeping 12 hours. So I've kind of gotten spoiled, and my routine has now been ruined by these Club World Cup games. But yeah, we have a great one tonight. Club America against Real Madrid should be a fantastic game.
So I didn't. Oh, sorry, Tyler, go ahead.
I was going to say, so obviously, unless you have some sort of very good travel arrangements, you are not going to be calling that one in person. So I am wondering how that impacts the way you call a game, because obviously, say that USA-Mexico game, you're there, you can see what's happening, you can kind of look down the sidelines. I'm assuming you were there and see the adjustments that are being made. The coach is giving instructions. Okay, what's he saying? Let's see what they change as a result. Does it impact your ability to call a game when you are doing it from a remote location?
Yeah, it absolutely does. I mean, it's less than ideal, but we also understand that we are in budget. As much as we like to admit it, it just wouldn't make sense to send a team out to the Club World Cup. I realize that now, TV side of point of views, and as a player, and you guys just nailed it on the head. You want to be on location. You want to be on site, feeling the atmosphere, being able to see things that perhaps one camera shot or the world feed's not picking up, and it's always a benefit when you have that. And I think that was my first couple games. I'd done a few off the monitor, and it's a lot to get used to, because your energy levels, you have to try a little bit harder to bring those up. You have to stay in tune to a game if perhaps it's a slow game, and the tendency would just to be to sit there in the little cubicle and just kind of tune out. So those games, I would say, are a lot harder than when you get in person, and those are the ones that make me love broadcasting. When I'm at US-Mexico or Mexico-Uruguay, and the stadium's full of 90,000 people screaming, and you have the open-air booth, and you just kind of feel that vibe, and that was what really draws me. I feel closest to the game, but I also am aware that I can no longer physically play. So once I kind of set that in and was like, hey, this is my career now, I just kind of I love doing it, and I hope to have a long career in broadcasting.
We hope you do too, Stu. We hope you do too. One question I had that's a little bit behind the scenes. I'd love to know, how far in advance do you know which games you'll be calling? And how is it decided with Fox, sort of, who gets to do which games? Like, did you and Brad Friedel have to arm wrestle for the US-Mexico game? And if so, how did you win?
Yeah, because I think I would lose that one, to be honest. We get our schedules, it varies. So, a couple of times, for example, I know my schedule right now through the end of December, and then I don't know what's happening in January. We have a rough idea of dates for Bundesliga and FA Cup and kind of properties we're used to working. But, a lot of those bigger assignments, USA-Mexico, I didn't really find out until 2 weeks before that I was going to be doing that game. And that was one that I really wanted. So when I did get the call, I was super excited, because the U.S. I think is my bread and butter, and it's the team I played for. It has a big game feel to it. It's a game that I'll always want to do. So those ones when you get that call from your boss and he says, hey, you're traveling to Columbus, you're going to call the game. That to me gets me excited. It feels like my cup final in many ways as a broadcaster. And, the next stuff as far as Confeds Cup next summer and then the World Cup in 2 years, we won't know those, probably the World Cup schedule, we wouldn't know until probably 2 weeks before the tournament, at which point when the schedule comes out and you get your, everybody gets their assignments, that's when you kind of start looking around and be like, oh, I got this game, this one's going to be great. Or why did he get that game? I want that game. But, we don't get paid to make those decisions. We get to go out there and cover the games we do. And I always hope that, my work speaks for itself and that my bosses are watching. And, even if it's a Club World Cup game at 2 a.m, I'm going to do my best work and hope that always reflects well on me.
So say when you get the notification that you're going to do the USA-Mexico game, is your first step, like, do you text everyone that you know on the U.S. national team and say, like, hey, apologies in advance for when I savage you? Like, is that part of your thought process when you're preparing for these games and even calling these games that, like, I'm assuming you know these guys. You probably hang out with a couple of them on different occasions. So does that make it harder to say, like, I don't know what Mikey was doing there, referring to Michael Bradley? Because we would call him Michael Bradley.
Yeah, no,
I bet you have nicknames.
Honestly, that was the hardest part is to be to call games that your friends are playing in, because I do know a large majority of that U.S. team, and it is an interesting switch when you go from player to broadcaster, and everybody knows there's kind of a line, and it's not like I'm going to be going out to dinner with all my buddies 2 nights before the game, and they're in their mode, I'm in my mode, and we I catch up with guys along the way and phone, and we normally wait till the game's over, but I think most guys recognize that I have a job to do as a broadcaster, much as they do as a player. And that was tough at first. And that's what one of my bosses told me. I'll never forget Shaw Brown, one of the producers at Fox. He said, you have to put that stuff aside and realize that you have to say it how it is. And that's just the way it is. And if you say it in the right way, and if you pick it apart, and there's certain ways of saying things instead of just jumping guys down guys' necks and saying, oh, that's a terrible pass. Just little things of, I can see what he was trying to do, but the defender did well, or it just was a bad pass. Simply, it was a bad pass. But as soon as you start protecting players, the viewers, smart viewers like yourselves, you notice those types of things. And then all of a sudden you kind of lose your credibility as a broadcaster. So it was a hard thing for me at first, but I've always, again, I have a job to do. And I think that's first and foremost where my allegiance is. And most of the responses from players that I played with and against have all been positive, and that they've been complimentary in the fact of the way I've been able to say things while still having an opinion. Even Jurgen Klinsmann, when I was heavily critical of him, I have a good relationship with Jurgen, and I know he probably didn't like that, but I think he also, if he was looking at the game, he would respect that my opinion in that moment. He could see where it's coming from, whether he agrees with it or not. That's the number one thing. I have an opinion and I have to go with it. And that's where you need to be strong in those types of moments if you want to be a good broadcaster.
So you've obviously made the transition, like I would say, really successfully from player to broadcaster. I sort of wanted to ask about the initial early days of sort of, when you first talked to Fox about doing something. Or
NBC, right?
Or NBC, sorry, early on, yeah. But how do you decide what your role's going to be? Are you like, okay, I'm going to be an in-studio analyst, I'm going to do play-by-play, or I'm going to do colour? Like, how do you get to decide, or how is it figured out exactly what your role's going to be? Because it's like picking a position on the field, right?
No, you guys have some good questions. No, I mean, again, Shaw Brown was the one. I tore my ACL in the Gold Cup 2013. I moved to LA to do my rehab. My contract at Bolton was just kind of winding down. And Shaw calls me and he says, "Hey, what are you up to?" And I said, "Well, I'm rehabbing in LA." He said, "Would you be interested in calling some games for NBC, MLS?" And I said, "Sure." I've done studio work in the past, but I'd never done color. And so, I worked with them. I did a 2-hour seminar on just kind of the basics. Did that game, enjoyed it. But that role for NBC at the time, I don't even know if you guys remember it, but it was, you have a monitor on the side of the field. You're not even up in a booth. Right. You're actually physically between the benches calling the game from a monitor. Then you had to interview a player or a coach, and then you had to rush to set for the halftime show and do studio for halftime, rush back, do an interview, call the game, and then do the post game. And I was, after 2 games of that, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. I couldn't believe like how much work I had to do, and I was so stressed. I didn't feel like I was good. And I'm actually really thankful for those experiences, because then when I got up into a booth and I'm sat alongside the play-by-play and the more of a more traditional thing, I was like, oh, this is much easier. So it's just like little things like that. And I guess the feedback I've had from my bosses is they love the color stuff, and they think I have a long future there, but they also think, I have a personality for studio. So it's a bit of a balance. They're completely different jobs. Studio is, get your point across in 30 seconds. Color is you have 90 minutes to talk, and you have 90 minutes to tell a story, I'd say, of, how the game is shaped up to be, setting up the story, then telling how it's kind of going from what you expected versus how it's playing out. And then you kind of put a bow on it at the end and say why this happened and why this team won. And I really enjoy that side, but I also enjoy studio. So I guess it's I've had conversations with my bosses about what I'll kind of be doing more of going forward. A lot of the Champions League, Europa stuff, I'm more in the studio, but for US, I'm more up in the booth where I think I have, more value. So it'll be interesting as it goes forward. I'll see kind of where it naturally evolves to. I love being on camera. We all do. I think if any of these guys lied to you and said, hey, I just like doing the studio to break down the game. No, you want to be on camera. Come on, we all do. It's all part of our egos. And so, I always hope that I'll have that component there of being in the studio and kind of being able to showcase my personality as well as the serious soccer side.
So generally with the studio, you've got pregame, halftime, postgame. During those time periods, you're going to get a question or two, as you said. You got like 30 seconds to kind of succinctly break that information down. Do you all, and this is a little bit maybe view behind the curtain, do you know roughly what's coming? Or is there a situation when you're like, feel prepared, and then Rob Stone just asks you something and you're like, they're going to have to do better, I guess? Like you just didn't see the question coming at all? Or do you generally have an idea of where you all want to take the conversation at halftime or in the postgame?
Well, this is an ever-going debate with broadcast television, with studio shows, and Alexi actually did a great pod with one of our bosses, John T. Whitehead, and he comes from a Sky background in England, where they just have a lot more time than us, and they'll have a pregame with maybe one break or two breaks, and it's 30 minutes, and the analysts get to talk for 20 minutes, and it's a really free-flowing conversation, and you don't really know which way it's going to go, and the analysts play off each other. And that would be, I would say, what every analyst here would want. The reality is it is that balance between, we have a lot of commercials and we have, a lot of sold elements, and that's what keeps us on the air, to where, if we have a minute and a half, 2 minutes of conversation, it is actually probably better in many cases to kind of have an idea of where each guy's going to go. And we discussed that in the production meeting before, or just have a little bit of a conversation between ourselves and get a few ideas out there to where if we have 2 minutes, we can be efficient and we can hit the most important topics, and it doesn't get sidetracked and you end up talking about something that's maybe not as relevant or as important to the game. So it is an ongoing debate. And again, you guys have another really good question there, and that, each show I would say is different. I did ESPN FC for a little while before I signed with Fox, and that show is, here's your topic. Nothing was discussed beforehand. Let's see where the conversation goes. A lot's reliant on the host Dan Thomas to kind of shape conversations and push certain buttons and get personalities going. And that's just a totally different vibe because it's a 30-minute pure soccer show. When you have a studio show, like we were saying, it's a little bit, you have to have some features and you have to set up the game. And we don't necessarily have that type of show at the moment yet with Fox, where it's just kind of free flowing, let it go, see where the conversation goes, and have some great debates.
I know we got to get you going here in just a few minutes. I had one more question for you, and then if Daryl, if you have any more, it's all you. Going back to the color commentary for a sec, I know some of the guys that you are doing the commentary for, either at MLS level or national team level, you've played with, and you maybe know their tendencies, you know what they like to do. Does that, do you look for that as well when you're watching them play? So say, for example, Michael Bradley. Michael Bradley likes to play diagonal balls with the instep versus the outside of his foot. Do you look for those moments to see if they're playing within their comfort zone, or is that something where it's just more you kind of erase that from your brain, you're focused more on the overall run of play?
No, that all plays a factor, and to be honest, they tell you you have a lot of value as a player that's just retired because you're relevant to the game in certain ways, and also you have insight on players and coaches that you've played against, and I don't think they can stress enough how important that is to emphasize. And it's not all about, well, I did this and I did that. It's more so, well, I've played against this guy and I know how he likes to play, or this guy was really tough to play against because Ozzy Alonso, because he kicked me off the ball, or he would do these certain things. And I think that can never be understated, to be honest. And that's something, links to players and coaches, and getting little quotes or having just an off-camera conversation with Michael Bradley about what he's looking to do within the game. And then if I see him doing that, I can say, well, Michael told me he was hoping to have, well, sorry, I wouldn't say Michael because that would imply that I was his friend on camera.
Mr. Bradley.
Mr. Bradley, told me yesterday that he was hoping to pick up the ball in midfield and look to spring Josie from deep. And that would be a piece of insight that the viewer at home would think, oh man, that's really cool. And now he's actually doing that, So those are those are all things I think I will always try to have. And again, it goes back to that fine line, that balance between my friends knowing that if they tell me something that it's not for, Twitter, or it's not for air, or hey, this is just for you and just for you to keep an eye on, but please don't air it, or, just little things like that. And that's where the trust factor goes. And we all know once you lose trust, that's hard to gain back. So I've had a lot of good scoops on certain things, and certain things I've chosen not to bring to public air, because it would lose me what I think would be more value in the long term. And that's still having a good connection and friendships that I value in the soccer world.
Well, Stu, we don't want to lose your trust by keeping you on the phone too long, because we know you have an important errand to run. So we do want to just say thank you for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it.
So thanks again to Stu Holden. We enjoyed having him on the show. We can confirm that Club America Real Madrid, the Club World Cup game, happened. We did not stay up to watch it.
We did not.
But we did watch the highlights afterwards.
Real Madrid winning 2-0.
Yep.
Worth noting, there was an American on the field, Ventura Alvarado.
Yeah,
started and played 54 minutes.
Yeah, we don't think he was subbed for performance issues. It was more they went from a back three to a back four.
Yeah, they were losing 1-0. I think Real Madrid scored in like 45 plus 2, so right at the very end of the half. I think Club America maybe stuck with the 3-5-2 for the first couple minutes of the second half, realized it wasn't working, maybe switched to a more attacking formation or a more conventional formation to try to get a result.
Was he to blame for the goal when he was on?
No, I don't think
we
so.
We took a good look,
We
right?
did.
He goes out wide from the back three, almost to a right back type spot. And the ball, I think it's a Toni Kroos ball.
Yes.
It's played through that gap. But he had to go out and cover that guy, right?
He had to go out and cover because you had, I think, Marcelo coming inside. I forgot who else was out there. And it was actually the guy, his teammate who steps to Toni Kroos, leaves that gap. And Karim Benzema was kind of standing there to begin with. And then was like, oh, okay. Thank you for the 10-yard gap. I'm Karim Benzema. I will score.
So no shame on Ventura Alvarado.
No. And I'm guessing no shame on Stuart Holden either. Just if past is precedent, I'm guessing he did a fine job.
I'm sure he did.
Yeah.
I enjoyed our interview with him.
As did I.
Nice guy. Final thing on today's show, Taylor. The Total Soccer Show Scouting Network.
Yes, sir.
We have 4 reports from promising young players coming in from around the world. He said without looking, hoping they're not all from one country. Start us off, Taylor.
More or less all over the place. First one comes from Douglas Chan, scouting Matt Miazga.
Hey.
Douglas first said that basically it had been a very long time since he had sent something in, but it wasn't his fault. It's basically Matt Miazga's failure to do anything particularly exciting.
So, quick refresh. Matt Miazga was signed by Chelsea, but has been sent on loan, as Chelsea players are wont to do, to the Eredivisie where he plays for Vitesse Arnhem, I believe. Okay.
Yes, and basically hasn't been playing too much. I think his last appearance was in early December, and he got like a garbage time cameo. But really, he's kind of the third choice center back for Vitesse.
Okay.
That said, Matt Miazga started and scored against Yoran Boys, I'm guessing that's how you pronounce it, in the KNBV Cup. Miazga's Vitesse side roughed up their fifth-tier opponents 4-0, with the American opening the scoring in the 15th minute. Following a Vitesse cross into the box, an attempted headed clearance by a JB defender fell to Matt. I guess Douglas and Matt are on first-name basis, who controlled it nicely with his right thigh before firing in a low half volley. Not a bad finish at all, but Douglas thinks that against any professional side, this shot was probably either going to be stopped or blocked.
Okay, so only fifth tier. In the cup, not the league, but still, Matt Miazga's doing something.
Minutes and goals, baby. Minutes and goals.
Minutes and goals. I'm sure that's not what he expected when he went to Vitesse, though.
I would guess not.
Many more minutes and not as many goals he expected. Up next, Trevor McQuire is scouting Sebastian Bofo Saucedo. Oh, I saw some news about this. Trevor says, Saucedo has returned to Real Salt Lake, there we go, from a season-long loan to Veracruz in Mexico. Saucedo celebrated his return to Utah with an invitation to the US Under-20 national team camp in Costa Rica, where he will look to earn a spot in the CONCACAF U20 Championship roster. The camp will aid in preparation for the 2017 CONCACAF U20 Championship, which takes place from February 17th to March 5th, and serves as a qualifying tournament for the 2017 FIFA U20 World Cup in South Korea. Did you catch all that, Taylor?
Lots of tournaments. And hopefully Sebastian will be involved.
So essentially there's a U20 camp right now. There's going to be a CONCACAF tournament in February/March. And I think we have to do reasonably well in that tournament to get to the U20 World Cup, which takes place later this year.
There we are. Up next is one I think is meant for you, Mr. Grove, but I will read it. It's from Marcus Goodrich, scouting Shiloh Tracy. He says, on Shiloh Tracy's behalf, we both accept your apology.
See yesterday's show.
Yes. But I think a quick disclaimer is basically Daryl maybe misidentified a player and blamed a miss on Shiloh Tracy.
Yeah, it was Shane Harrison that missed,
and now Marcus has accepted the apology.
Okay.
He says, when you guys read my scouting report, I was confused when Daryl made the comment about Tracy fluffing his lines, but I just assumed it was on me and then I missed one of his games. Glad to know I didn't.
I'm glad we could clear that up. Final scouting report comes from Jeff Markman, scouting Arsenal's Jeff Rene Adelaide. I didn't know they got a namesake scouting report here. Jeff says, the other Jeff, Rene Adelaide, started Arsenal's final 2 EFL Cup matches, a 2-0 win over Reading and a 2-0 loss to Southampton. He's also been featuring for the Gunners in the UEFA Youth League, though that campaign has now ended thanks to a 1-1 draw with FC Basel U23s.
They had to win to advance. They drew against FC Basel U23s, so they're out of that competition.
This means that the Jeff's most likely option for playing time is the Premier League 2. And as Jeff Markman reports, I'll continue to monitor his performance with the U23 PL2 team, but admit alone would probably make my scouting reports more interesting.
Well, January is right around the corner, Jeff, and the Jeff can maybe get a move. Jeff.
The Jeff. All right, thank you to Douglas, to Trevor, to Marcus, and to the Jeff.
Yep.
The other Jeff.
The other Jeff.
The other Jeff. For submitting your scouting reports. If you would like to join them in the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network, all the details are at totalsoccershow.com/subscribe.
These are facts.
These are facts. All that remains to say today, Taylor, is thank you, sir, for taking the time to talk to me.
Hey, Daryl.
Hey.
Right back at you, buddy.
Hey. Listeners, thank you for listening. We'll be back on Friday with yet another Total Soccer Show.